Hey everybody, how you doing? A little bit of apologies because the lighting and I'm recording this and it's kind of late and I'm working. I've got the horn and I'm working on tracks and I'm doing things. And but in a way, as I was thinking about this, it occurred to me that maybe this is exactly the way I should record something like this from the zone, from the place where we make the music. And this video is specifically for musical peeps. This is really for um, those of us who care about it. I and I the minute you even start to go down this road, I find myself this is in some ways a difficult video to make, and I've touched on this stuff before, and I have struggled with it. I'm usually not a guy who's at a loss for words. That's not a big problem of mine. But when you care about something so much, and you want to make sure that you're understood, you want to make sure that people take it the right way. And I'm unscripted, so that's a further handicap in a sense. This is an extemporaneous thing. But I think with the extemporaneous usually comes a greater degree of the real, um, and I think there's something to be said for that. So I've made my decision in that area. When the minute we get into a musical discussion, what's tough about it is like, look, we live in a culture that is fractured in 9,000 ways. Now, in some degree, it's always been like that, but it's worse right now, definitely worse. Okay, and that bleeds down in everything. And musicians, we don't agree on. It's hard to have a musical discussion because there's so many different interpretations, so many different approaches, so many different sets of values. And it's hard to try to discuss something in some overarching way where somehow the umbrella covers everybody. And that's kind of an impossible task. But I think there are probably enough things that we can agree on so that we can sort of have a discussion here. Um, I'm a trumpet player. I've spent early part of my life all being about jazz and playing jazz and just loving that and everything about it. And these days, I'm as much composer and producer as anything else. And I'm writing instrumental music. And after this long journey, you know, for me, it's really I love instrumental music. Now, I'm not knocking singer songwriters. I'm not, but for me, that the interplay of harmony, its ability to speak to people, and again, its ability to move people um, without the words is fantastic. And again, it's about moving people, not so much moving each other. All right. In other words, music for people to be affected by the way we were as listeners starting out. Um, and an emphasis on that as being more important than simply impressing other musicians playing for musicians. So take I look, everyone's got a point of view and I do too, and we're all forged by whatever world we're in. I'd like to think I've inhabited a number of different ones over many years so that I think I have some perspective on the way, because I have friends who are, doing all sorts of different kinds of music than I do. So, and I like to talk to them because I like to hear that perspective. I go, wow, I never would have thought of it that way. That stuff's good. So I'd like to think that maybe I have some perspective on this. But where I'm the place I'm kind of starting with this is being frustrated, I suppose, by music on social media. Now, when social media first happened, I mean, I think there were some advantages to it because what it was and what it is now, not the same thing. Initially you're bumping into all sorts of people you hadn't bumped into a long time, and it was a totally different ecosystem than what it's obviously become. And now we realize just how bad all that is. And I at the same time, there's a certain. I'm not saying it has to disappear. There's a certain utility there, and it's fine. Again, it's not. that there's some great evil, that there's some great black and white in all this. It's about finding a balance. And for musicians, I'm increasingly looking at social media or musicians on social media or the music. Let's put it, maybe I should be more specific. What gets pushed, what the algorithm pushes in social media in regards to music. Ingesting that probably isn't good for musicians because it is so shallow. It's we live in a time where there are tons of people who play really well, play incredibly well, and a lot of them out there on social media playing. And there's a lot of things out there that maybe they're doing it, maybe they're right. There's that too. But even if that's make the assumption that people are playing the things that they say that they're playing, and most of the time they probably are. Tons of great players, tons of great players. But it's all really, not all, pretty much all. There's a large segment, a world of music video out there that is guys showing off technique. I say guys, but being unisex in this. People with extraordinary technique showing off extraordinary technique. And it, like the internet always does, it tends to magnify things, and usually all out of proportion. So you see, it would make you think, the impression you can get is that there's all these folks doing all these fantastic gigs all the time, which clearly isn't happening. But there's all these folks out there. They're all working all the time. They're playing all the time. They're all unbelievable players. That could get you kind of depressed, right? So I would imagine younger players seeing this and go, "What's the point? How can I compete with this?" And I think the answer is that you can. Once you realize that the picture you're getting isn't necessarily all that accurate. Yes, there are tons of people out there playing on your instrument, whatever that is. I see tons of trumpet player videos. My God, there's some killer players out there, just ridiculous players. But there always have been tons of killer players. But what you see is you don't see a lot of art. You only see a lot of technique. And again, it's very shallow. And it's obvious that there's a world of people, musical people, who are incredibly shallow and insecure. And it's a self-destructive impulse to watch this stuff and think, wow, aren't they great? Yeah, on one level, they're great. They're playing all this stuff. But technique by itself is musical masturbation. It's not why we should be doing it. But that aspect gets magnified 9 ways from Sunday. So again, social media is that magnifying glass that gets put onto things, right? It makes things bigger. In a way, with all the bad things that come from that, I think we should be able to take away a good thing that comes from that. It shows an inherent problem. It just makes it larger, so that we should be able to recognize it instead of going, "Oh yes, all these great players are, and I'll just get rid of, why bother?" No. I think you should notice how shallow it is and go, "Wow." I'm not saying don't play great, right? But there is a balance to be achieved. And this is what we're seeing is something way out of balance. And again, I think that's endemic of internet since the 90s and social media and the accelerant, the gasoline that is to just really get things confused. I think we've lost that balance. I'm reminded of, and I think again, this out of balance that we're seeing magnified social, I think it does reflect a bit of reality, and a bit of reality worth paying attention to. There was one of my favorite books, music books, specifically about playing the trumpet. So my axe was by Professor Frank Gabriel Campos, who taught at Ithaca College in upstate New York for a long time. Ithaca's a good school. I have a lot of friends who went to Ithaca. Ithaca guys are good musicians, that's for sure. Rick Beato was an Ithaca guy. I'm a Berkeley guy, okay. But there are a lot of good schools out there, and they're wonderful, frankly. But Campos did a book on, he was a trumpet professor, he did a book called Trumpet Technique. And at the very beginning of the book, and I love this because he was going to talk about technique, but before he did, in his first chapter, he talked about two extremes, neither of which being good. If you're a slave to technique, if you're a pedant, you are pedantic. Again, musical masturbation, right? You've got an unbelievable amount of technique, and you don't say anything to really much of anybody. That can't be the answer, right? It's emptiness. But there's the opposite, and we see that celebrated just as much as we see the pedantic celebrated. Those who have all this message, all this stuff to say, feeling it, and not able to technically express it, right? A dilettantism, and there is and has been tons of that, and that's a real bad thing too. Neither is any good. Trying to find a balance is a big deal. And does something get an edge? Is it a 50-50 balance? Well, now we can have a whole other discussion. I personally think message eventually, 51-49 maybe, it has to outweigh the technique. Technique is your on-ramp to the highway of musicality. You've got to have it. You sure got to work on it. I work on it every day. Always trying to get better at playing. But I've known tons of musicians, and there are whole communities of musicians, for whom saying anything, I don't know what you're talking about. It's all about their technical proficiency. I used to wonder why studio musicians, great studio musicians, a group of people, incidentally, I have extremely high regard for. I think they're as good a players as you're going to find. Why don't they make more records? And when they do, why do they fall flat? And they do, often. Why? And I think it's about the meaning of the music and the fact that they could play rings around anything, but what are they personally saying? I think it's important. We're supposed to be saying something. And a lot of times it doesn't happen that way. I love jazz and the history of jazz. And the history of jazz is all about personal expression. And one of the things that's happened to jazz that's hurt it, and I've been, my generation, I'm not saying, oh, my guys got it right. My guys didn't get it right. My generation is part of a group of people who started to learn it in school. The jazz goes to the academy. My alma mater is the beginning of, oh, we're gonna teach jazz in schools, which is a well-intentioned and a good idea in a lot of ways, but it made it an academic exercise. And academia, the effect of academia took a lot of the soul out of it. Something similar has happened in classical music. I know, I have a few friends in that world, or acquaintances, people that I know pretty well, well enough, who played in, serious orchestras. In their candid moments, will sit there and say that the great orchestras of the past seemed very committed to the meaning of the pieces, to serving the composers. And increasingly, orchestras seem to have less punch, visceral. I went to a performance in New York Philharmonic some years back, not that long ago, when they were doing Rimsky-Korsakov, and they were going to play Scheherazade, one of my favorite things, and I found it lacking. Almost, it was being played almost apologetically. They couldn't bring themselves to really do Russian romanticism. That would be gauche or something. And I was so dismayed. They were, a lot of this in that world, and a lot of in jazz as it currently stands, is like having music played by a human resources department. Yeah, devoid of all the humanity, all the stuff that made it a thing worth checking out in the first place. I've enormous problems with music education because I've always, and since I wondered this since I was a kid, why were we talking about what the pieces mean? We often use the phrase that music is a language. We often, that framing, that metaphor that music's a language. It's not a terrible metaphor, okay. But when we learn to read, right, we go through that process of learning to read, but eventually we get to reading, in high school, if it's The Catcher in the Rye, or it's Romeo and Juliet, or it's Julius Caesar, or whatever, you're Mencken, or, Dickens, and you're going to start reading some serious stuff. Emily Dickinson, whatever it is, you're going to get into some serious stuff. Now we're talking about what these people had to say and what it meant. You read the essays of Emerson and Thoreau, it's about what they meant, what the intention was, the values, what they were saying. And we don't do that in music. We're very scared to really, we don't want to touch that. We might actually say something. It's amazing to me how that, the degree that gets put to the side. People don't want to touch that. They're too involved in who's auditioning for what. It's kind of incredible to me. And again, I think it's very, very shallow. And I think, I'm sure I'm not alone in this. I think those of you out there, I think there's a lot of you who feel that music is an extremely profound thing. And it being turned into a commodity of some kind, and that shallow playing, although perfect, says it. It just doesn't. Um, and this is so hard to discuss because you don't want to be seen as, and I don't want to be seen as someone sitting there going, yes, if we all were just less technically proficient. No, no, no. I want the technique, but I want the technique in service of something. And I will take something a little less than absolute perfection on technique to get that. Um, I'm an enormous Miles Davis guy. There's a lot of talk about Miles because it's the 100th anniversary of Miles's birth, but I don't know if I've told this story before, but it's true, is that when I was going to college at Berkeley, one of my teachers was a guy named Lou Mucci, who was in the Gil Evans Orchestra. And previously he'd been in the Claude Thornhill band. That's a real deep dive to find out even who that was or what they were doing. But it was a band that had one of the arrangers in that band was Gil Evans. And so my teacher, Lou, knew Gil. And so him and Gil and Lou was friends with Gil. And so when it came down to do the record, Miles Ahead, which was the first of the 3 records they did, Miles with Gil Evans, 3 big band records they did, which don't sound like any big band record you've ever heard in your life. Lou was on the date. And the other trumpet players, Bernie Glow, and I'm trying to remember the other guys, I can't off the top of my head, but I mean, they're top New York session guys. And at the session, according to my teacher, and I remember the story very well because it made such an impression on me, there was a sense that they were, Miles Davis, they didn't have a lot of respect for him technically as a trumpet player. And they went to this date going, yeah, okay, and they do the date. And, Miles wasn't some perfect trumpet player. You listen to the records and little clips and little things. But after the session was done, after the recording session was done, and Miles was soloing in front of the band, in those days, recording was recording, right? They were recording live. They weren't multi-tracking things. They were recording live. The trumpet players in that section, one of them said to the other guys, hey, listen, he doesn't play as well as we play. But none of us would have taken the artistic chances that he did. None of us would have come up with those ideas. And none of us would have just had the intestinal fortitude to just lay that out there the way a jazz guy with confidence will or can. And I thought it said an enormous amount that the guys with the better technique were probably the guys in the big band. But the person doing the artistic work was probably someone with slightly lesser technique, but with this vision, with an ear and going for a thing. And did so. So, where is that all taking us? I just think I think if you see this stuff online with people playing the insane stuff, and a lot of it is instructional, and I should also say too, that's fine. And again, if you can get something out of it and you learn something, there's never been more information, right? There's an information glut. There's never been more information. You can learn harmony. I have little sympathy for anyone who goes, well, I can't figure out harmony. That's too tough for me. I mean, it's all out there. Explain 9 Ways from Sunday. I've read, speaking of Rick Beato, I mentioned before, Beato has his Beato book, which is a harmony primer. It's great. And one of the things I liked reading about it was in no way how I learned harmony at Berkeley. Because Berkeley has a very specific way. We even write chord symbols a little differently. People could tell what school you went to sometimes by the chord, So I love Beato's thing, and it's another way of expressing it. Okay, But the point is there are so many different approaches. There's no such thing as musical truth, right? That's why, look, that's why theory heads become a problem. Right? It's again this rush for pedantry, for this need to be the jazz police. Um, you know, arguing over enharmonic equivalence. I mean, things that affect nobody. And again, I think that's why I'm kind of critical of a lot of the jazz stuff these days, because to a large degree, it's a scene playing for other jazz guys. There's only a few real clubs. People playing. I remember seeing Mingus Big Band, noticing the soloist who played this unbelievable solo, and I realized, it came right out of Wayne Shorter in the 1960s. Only problem is, Wayne Shorter did that in the 1960s. Doing it now, what does it prove? That you can sound like Wayne Shorter in the 60s? What is that saying to anybody now? What Wayne was reacting to at that time, that world is then, and there's another world now. What are you going to do? And also these guys, especially with the jazz cats, they were creating this music. They weren't doing impressions of the things that came before them. In the 1960s, they weren't all sitting there going, oh, let's play like Louis Armstrong did in the 20s, which was only 40 years before. Right? They were creating their own thing. Who's creating their own thing now? Is there really a jazz sound that reflects this time? You'd be hard-pressed to find it. It's mainly, jazz at Lincoln Center? So they can do jazz repertory and make it a museum piece? They play great. I don't want to go see that. I have absolutely no interest. Look at the impression you guys did. Great. And I'm sure they see that as being the same as, what they do in classical circles when they play the older pieces. But the minute you do that, you basically say it's just not a living music. And I think classical music, to some degree, wrestles with that. There are new works, but they're essentially doing it for each other. So I think we need to be interested. I'll turn this a little bit from myself as it's a bit of a personal manifesto, I suppose, at this point is, I can't be bothered trying to play this to somehow get the approval of academe. I know a lot of, speaking of generational things, a lot of people that came up my time, they all want to be college professors. I don't get it. It's the only way to make a living or whatever. But I think they need badly to get that academic approval. And you just go to play vacuous stuff that doesn't say anything. And I think that means we need to be making an outreach to regular folks. We need to get in front of them something more advanced than what they're listening to now. Raise that level up again, which should go with what we already believe in anyhow. We're about raising the level. We got to get it to a popular audience to some degree so that they hear it. And doing it in established forms is probably not the way to go. We should be looking for new things that reflect this time, that reflect this culture, reflect what people need, because we're supposed to be writing for people. you'd say, well, then you're being a sellout. I don't know. I mean, I've always used sort of Steven Spielberg as an example. And I'm not always, I have kind of a love-hate relationship with Spielberg because I think sometimes he is a sellout. And I think his latest wasn't great. I saw it. Not so great. But at his best, he was able to make really good films that were also popular. He was able to touch regular folks and not compromise the quality. And that's quite a thing to do, but I think it's what we need, what music and musicians need more of. So, where did I start with this? More or less saying, gee, I don't know if we can all have the conversation, but really about the social media aspect, about what that is, what garbage that is. So, I would say as musical people, if you're on that diet, get off that diet. It's not helping you. It's not helping you. Find some. Here I am, right? Jazz person. And lately I've been wanting to listen to a lot of Ives and Hovhannes. Long form. Because it gets you into a deep place where you start hearing things and you can get creative. You're not going to get creative and do creative stuff because you watch this guy play like some perfect technical, virtuosic technique is fine, but it's not the answer. It's not all of it. And if you're looking for, everyone's chasing some holy grail, I suppose, but the closest I think you're going to get is this hybridization. But it's right now, look, if all was going on in the world where singer-songwriters with playing 3-chord tunes and about my baby done left me, that's a problem. And we would want, badly sung and, okay, the world of dilettantism. We don't want that. And there's a lot of that, and it's bad. It's always been bad. And then they have the Grammys every year, and they give them awards for it to celebrate how much money they made. It has nothing to do with music. Okay, and then you've got all the purists are out there. And they're going to have a fight about, who's being pure enough. And the technique is crazy. Nobody cares. Ain't the answer either. So have some technique, have some ability, do your best. Right? Play as well as you can. But say something, hopefully, to some people. Try to get it out there so that people, and I know how hard all that is. Don't have to sell me on that because this is a culture that will do nothing to support your interest in excellence. It will never support it. It's only about bread. So, is it hard? Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, this is a society right now that doesn't even understand art. And what they don't understand, they get angry at. They resent it. So it's tough. But what's as bad as that is to have people in our own world supposedly doing our thing who don't seem to have the first idea about, art's what? What? Meaning what? Saying what? Huh? What? Ooh. There's a problem. So we have to I've always believed, we got to get our own house in order. But that's what I see. And I see the social media thing and I sit there and go, okay, that's the beginning. There's something there. It is magnifying, as it always does, magnifying something, but magnifying there is a real thing there, and it is a problem. And we gotta. I think it's the only way to go about it is to put that a little further away from you, not take it too seriously, and just not be affected too much by that, and go listen to some stuff that what we've always needed to do, and get into a room like this, where hopefully it's dark and it's late at night and it's quiet, and you can work, and you can hear things, and the ideas will start to percolate. And remember, you don't get inspiration, then do the work. You do work, and with that comes inspiration. That's the way it works. You're waiting for inspiration, you won't do anything. Go do something. Get on the keyboard. Some little idea, some little germ. It's okay if it sucks. Fine. It will start to turn into something because you're a creative person. You'll get there. All right, guys. I hope some of this was in somehow cohesive and hopefully an argument that makes sense. And I know I'm kind of all over the place on this. It's a tough one to put into words. All of these disparate things that sort of coming together, and you go, there is a problem. Why aren't we? We've got a lot to fix. And what else can you do except live it? And that means, I'll speak for myself. And I'm gonna get ready to stop doing this. I'm gonna get to work and work on stuff that I think might actually affect some people. And hopefully, I've got a few people here who are pulling for me here. Maybe we're gonna get it out so that some people can hear it, and we can try to, in our own little way, make some kind of difference. Try to, how can we fix this culture? Oh, there's no political solution. Yeah, pretty much. I think you're pretty much right. So what do? Go back to work and make better music. You want to change the world? And you're a musician? Go make more music. That's what you can do. And when the time comes to vote, you only vote. But go make more music. And get off the social media. It's not doing you any favors, guys. Not doing you any favors at all. Alrighty. Talk to you soon. Have a good night.